Dr. Jai-Ho Park rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the computer screen. The clock on the wall showed 2:30 a.m., but he couldn't leave. Not now. The signal was too strange to ignore. He had been working at the Korean Space Research Institute for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this before. The Deep Space Monitoring Station was picking up patterns that made no sense. Usually, when stars died, they followed certain rules, but this signal broke all of them. Jai-Ho reached for his phone and called Dr. Hyun-A Kim. He knew she would be upset about a call this late, but this couldn't wait until morning. "Hyun-A, I need you to look at something," he said when she answered. "I'm sending you the data now." There was silence on the other end as Hyun-A looked at the figures. Then she spoke, her voice now fully awake. "This can't be right. Are you sure the equipment is working properly?" "I checked 3 times," Jai-Ho replied. "Everything is working fine. The signal is real." "I'll be there in 20 minutes," Hyun-A said and hung up. Jai-Ho turned back to his screens. The pattern was getting stronger. Somewhere in space, about 50 light-years from Earth, something massive was happening. The energy readings suggested it might be a black hole forming, but the numbers were all wrong. Black holes didn't behave like this. When Hyun-A arrived, her long white coat still unbuttoned, she went straight to Jai-Ho's computer. Her eyes widened as she looked at the live data. "The energy signature," she whispered. "It's like it's organizing itself." Jai-Ho nodded. "That's what caught my attention. Look at this pattern here." He pointed to a repeating wave on the screen. "It's too regular to be natural. At least, not according to what we know about black holes." They spent the next hour analyzing the data. With each passing minute, the signal grew stronger and more organized. It wasn't just random space noise or a dying star. This was something new. "We need to call Director Yang," Hyun-A said finally. "This is too big for just us." Jai-Ho agreed. As the head of their department, Director Yang needed to know. But Jai-Ho also knew that once they reported this, everything would change. Their quiet research station would soon be filled with other scientists and government officials. Before making the call, Jai-Ho saved all the data to a separate hard drive. He had learned from experience that important discoveries needed backups. Lots of backups. Director Yang arrived an hour later, looking surprisingly put together for someone who had been woken up at 4 a.m. He listened carefully as Jai-Ho and Hyun-A explained what they had found. "Show me the comparison with normal black hole formations," he said. Jai-Ho pulled up 2 screens side by side. On the left was data from a typical black hole formation they had observed last year. On the right was the current signal. The difference was clear even to untrained eyes. "The energy isn't just collapsing inward like it should," Hyun-A explained. "It's moving in patterns, almost like it's alive." Jai-Ho finished her sentence. Director Yang was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Within hours, their quiet night of discovery turned into a whirlwind of activity. By sunrise, the research station was buzzing with energy. Teams of scientists rushed in and out, carrying equipment and setting up new monitoring stations. The government had given them emergency priority access to every telescope in the country. Jai-Ho stood by his original computer, watching as his discovery grew bigger than he had ever imagined. Beside him, Hyun-A was already organizing the incoming data. "Whatever this is," she said quietly, "it's going to change everything we know about space." Jai-Ho looked at the main screen one more time. The signal was still there, growing stronger and more complex with each passing minute. In all his years of studying space, he had dreamed of making a big discovery. But now that it was happening, he felt both excited and afraid. Something was being born out there in the darkness of space, something that might change our understanding of the universe forever. And they were the first ones to see it. 3 days after discovering the strange signal, Jai-Ho sat in the main conference room of the Korean Space Research Institute. The room was filled with the smell of coffee and the low hum of worried conversations. Director Yang stood at the front, pointing to a large screen showing the latest data. "We need the best minds on this project," Director Yang said. "Dr. Park and Dr. Kim have already proven this signal is real. Now we need to understand what it means." Jai-ho looked at the list of names on his tablet. They had chosen them carefully. Each person was the best in their field, but more importantly, they could keep a secret. The world wasn't ready to know about this discovery yet. The first person to arrive was Dr. Tadawon Lee, the quantum physicist. He walked into the room carrying 3 tablets and a laptop, nearly dropping them all when he tried to bow. Ji-ho helped him with his equipment. "Is it true?" Tadawon asked, his eyes bright with excitement. "The patterns in the signal, they break quantum theory." "See for yourself," Jai-ho said, showing him the latest data. Tadawon sat down and immediately began typing on his laptop. He didn't even notice when Dr. Hae-yoon Choi entered the room. Hae-yoon was their stellar formation specialist. She had spent 20 years studying how stars were born and died. Now she stood in front of the main screen, her face serious as she studied the readings. "This isn't possible," she said quietly. "Black holes don't form like this. The energy should be chaotic. But these patterns..." She turned to Jai-ho. "How long has it been doing this?" 4 days now," Hyun-ae answered, walking in with fresh coffee for everyone. "And the patterns are getting more complex." Director Yang called the meeting to order. The room fell silent as he explained the situation. The government had given them full support and resources, but they needed answers quickly. Other space agencies were starting to notice something strange in that region of space. "We have 2 weeks," Director Yang said. "After that, we won't be able to keep this quiet anymore." Taiwan looked up from his laptop. 2 weeks, but this is completely new physics. We need months, maybe years to understand what's happening. "We don't have years," Jai-ho said. "Whatever is happening out there, it's happening now. We need to understand it before someone else does." Hae-yoon stood up and walked to the screen. "Look at these energy patterns," she said, pointing to a series of waves. "They're almost like a language." The room went quiet again. Everyone stared at the screen. "A language?" Hyun-ae asked. "You mean something is trying to communicate?" "Not exactly," Hae-yoon said. "But these patterns are too organized to be random. Nature doesn't work like this. At least, not the nature we know." Director Yang rubbed his forehead. "I want you all working on this full-time. Dr. Park will lead the team. Dr. Kim will handle the data analysis. Dr. Lee focus on the quantum aspects. Dr. Choi map these patterns against every known stellar event in our database." As everyone began to move to their assigned tasks, a young researcher rushed into the room. Min Ji-kang was the newest member of their team, fresh from her doctorate studies. "Dr. Park," she called out, holding up her tablet. "I think I found something in the signal. It's not just organized, it's growing. Like a living thing." The room froze. Ji-ho took the tablet from Min-ji's hands and studied the data. She was right. The patterns weren't just becoming more complex, they were evolving. "Everyone," Jai-ho said, his voice firm. "I know we all have questions. I know this breaks everything we thought we knew about space. But right now, we might be watching the birth of something completely new, something that could change our understanding of the universe." He looked at each person in the room. "We have 2 weeks to figure this out. Let's make them count." The team split up, each heading to their own workstations. As Jai-ho watched them go, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something bigger than any of them had ever imagined. 1 week had passed since the team began their work. The research center's main lab had transformed into a maze of computers, cables, and coffee cups. Papers covered with complex equations lined the walls, and screens displayed ever-changing data from space. Min Ji-kang sat at her desk, her eyes fixed on her computer screen. For 5 days straight, she had been working on an algorithm to analyze the strange patterns coming from the forming black hole. Something about them seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. "Dr. Park," she called out suddenly, "I need you to look at this." Jai-Ho walked over, holding his third cup of coffee that morning. The lack of sleep showed on his face, but his eyes were alert. "What did you find?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder. Min-ji pointed to her screen. "Watch this pattern. Now watch what happens when I apply this new algorithm I created." On the screen, the chaotic waves of energy from the black hole began to arrange themselves into clear, repeating patterns. It looked almost like writing. Jai-Ho whispered, "It looks like writing." Hyun-A and Taiwan heard him and rushed over. Soon, the whole team gathered around Min-ji's computer. "The patterns repeat every 12 minutes, Min-ji explained. "At first, I thought it was just random space noise, but when I mapped it against known communication patterns, something interesting happened." She pressed a few keys, and a new image appeared. It showed two patterns side by side. "The one on the left is the signal from the black hole," she said. "The one on the right is the pattern our brains make when we learn something new. They're almost exactly the same." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the screen, trying to understand what this meant. "Are you saying," Hae-yoon spoke slowly, "that this black hole is learning?" "Not exactly," Min-ji said, "but it's organizing information in a way that's very similar to how our brains do it. And look at this." She showed them another set of data. "These patterns started appearing 3 days ago. They're getting more complex, more organized, like whatever's happening out there is developing, growing." Taiwan adjusted his glasses, his hands shaking slightly. "This matches some of my quantum calculations. The energy isn't just collapsing inward like in a normal black hole. It's creating new patterns, new structures." Jai-Ho stood up straight, his mind racing. "We need to try to communicate with it." "Communicate?" Hyun-A looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Jai-Ho, it's a black hole, not a person." "No," Jai-Ho said firmly. "It's something new, something we've never seen before. And if Min-ji is right, if it's organizing information like a brain does, then maybe we can send patterns of our own." Director Yang, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, stepped forward. "How would we do that?" Min-ji turned back to her computer. "We could use the deep space transmitter. If I modify my algorithm, we could send patterns similar to the ones we're receiving." "It's risky," Hyun-A warned. "We don't know how it might react." "We don't have much choice," Jai-Ho said. "In 1 week, other space agencies will detect this. We need to understand what we're dealing with before that happens." Director Yang nodded slowly. "Do it. But be careful. Start with simple patterns, something basic." The team worked through the night, preparing their first attempt at communication. Min-ji's fingers flew over her keyboard as she modified her algorithm. Taiwan checked and rechecked the quantum calculations, making sure they weren't about to make a terrible mistake. As the sun rose the next morning, they were ready. Jai-Ho looked at each member of his team, seeing the mix of excitement and fear on their faces. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we're about to make history." Min-ji took a deep breath and pressed the button to send their first signal into space, toward the mysterious black hole that seemed to be more than just a cosmic phenomenon. Now they could only wait and see if something would answer back. The team waited for 3 hours after sending their first signal. The room was silent except for the soft beeping of computers and the quiet breathing of tired scientists. No one wanted to leave their stations, afraid they might miss something important. Min-ji kept checking her screens, making sure all the recording equipment was working properly. Hyun-A paced back and forth, glancing at the main display every few seconds. Taiwan had fallen asleep at his desk, his glasses slightly crooked on his face. Then it happened. Movement in the signal. Min-ji called out, jolting everyone awake. "Something's changing." The main screen lit up with new data. The black hole's energy patterns were shifting, reorganizing themselves. It wasn't just copying their signal, it was responding to it. "Look at this," Heyoon said, pointing to a series of waves. "It's matching our pattern, but adding something new at the end, like it's completing the sentence." Dr. Sunwoo Baek, their theoretical physicist who had been quietly working in the corner, suddenly stood up. "This isn't just communication," he said. "This is proof of something much bigger." Everyone turned to look at him. Sunwoo rarely spoke unless he was absolutely certain about something. "What do you mean?" Jae-ho asked. Sunwoo walked to the main screen, his eyes bright with excitement. "We've been thinking about this all wrong. We thought we were watching a black hole form. But what if we're actually watching something being born?" He pulled up old data from other black holes. Normal black holes destroy everything they touch. But this one is creating new patterns, new structures. It's not destroying space, it's organizing it. Like a womb. The room fell silent as everyone processed this idea. Ji-ho felt his heart racing. Could it be possible? "Are you saying," Hyun-ae spoke slowly, "that this black hole is pregnant?" "Not exactly," Sunwoo said, "but I think it's creating something. A new space, maybe even a new universe, and now it's trying to tell us about it." Minji's computer beeped again. New patterns were appearing, more complex than before. "It's responding faster now," she said, "like it's learning how to talk to us." Jae-ho made a quick decision. "Send another signal. Something more complex this time. Let's see if it can handle it." Minji typed quickly, sending a new pattern of energy waves toward the black hole. This time, they only had to wait 15 minutes for a response. The new signal was clear and structured, almost like a conversation. Through their computers, humans were talking to something that existed in the space between universes. "Dr. Park." Director Yang called from the doorway. He had been watching everything quietly. "The American Space Agency just called. They've detected our signals. They want to know what's going on." Jae-ho looked at his team. They had managed to keep their discovery secret for almost 2 weeks, but now the world would know. Everything would change. "Tell them the truth," Jae-ho said. "Tell them we've made contact with something extraordinary, something that might change everything we know about the universe." As Director Yang left to make the call, the team turned back to their work. The black hole, or whatever it really was, kept sending signals. Each message was clearer than the last, each pattern more meaningful. "Look at this," Minji said softly. "It's beautiful." On her screen, the energy patterns had formed into a complex dance of light and shadow. It looked like a heartbeat, like something new taking its first breath. Somewhere out in space, 50 light years from Earth, something wonderful was happening, and humanity was there to witness it, to learn from it, to understand that the universe was far more amazing than anyone had ever imagined. The news spread across the world like wildfire. Within 24 hours of revealing their discovery, the Korean Space Research Institute became the center of global attention. Reporters crowded outside the building, and scientists from every major space agency demanded to see the data. Dr. Yun Ji-shin stood at the podium in the main conference hall, facing a sea of cameras and microphones. As the team's spokesperson, she had the difficult job of explaining their discovery to the world. "What we have found," she said clearly, "is evidence that black holes may be more than what we thought. The one we are studying appears to be creating something new." The room erupted with questions. Reporters shouted over each other, their voices mixing into a loud buzz. Yunji remained calm, just as she had practiced with Jae-ho and the team. "Please," she raised her hand for quiet. "We will answer all questions, but first, you need to understand what we have seen." Behind her, large screens showed the patterns they had recorded. The beautiful dance of energy waves played out for all to see. The room fell silent as everyone watched in wonder. In the back of the room, Jae-ho stood with Hyun-ae and the rest of the team. They watched as Yeonji explained their work in simple terms that everyone could understand. She had a special gift for making complex science clear and exciting. Our team has not only observed this event, Yanji continued, but we have also established communication with it. The patterns you see are part of an ongoing exchange of signals. A reporter stood up. Are you saying you're talking to a black hole? In a way, yes, Yanji answered. But it's more accurate to say we're witnessing and interacting with a process we don't fully understand yet. Something new is being created out there in space. Back in the lab, Minji kept working on the signals. She couldn't attend the press conference because the black hole was sending new messages. They were getting stronger and clearer every hour. Director Yang moved between the lab and the conference room, bringing updates to both sides. The government had promised full support, but they were also getting pressure from other countries who wanted to be part of the research. Russia and China have already offered to share their telescope networks, he told Joyo. The Americans are sending a team to help us analyze the data. The Europeans want to set up a joint research program. Jaiho nodded, but his mind was on something else. The latest signals showed new patterns, ones they hadn't seen before. Something was changing in the black hole. We need to focus on what's happening up there, he said. The politics can wait. But the politics wouldn't wait. By evening, the Korean president had called an emergency meeting with other world leaders. Everyone wanted to be part of this historic moment. Yanji finished her press conference and joined the team in the lab. She looked tired but satisfied. They understand the basics now, she said, but no one knows what to do next. This is bigger than any one country. Hyunei looked up from her computer. Something's changing in the signal pattern. It's getting stronger. The team gathered around her screen. The black hole's messages were indeed different now. The patterns were more urgent, more complex. It's like it knows we're all watching now, Minji said quietly. Like it's trying to tell us something important. Jaiho looked at his team, then at the screen showing their discovery to the world. They had started this journey in secret, but now all of humanity would be part of it. Whatever was being born out there in space, it would change everything for everyone. The international science team gathered in the main laboratory of the Korean Space Research Institute. Screens covered every wall, showing data from telescopes around the world. All of them pointed at the same spot in space, where something remarkable was happening. Sun Woo-baek stood at the front of the room, explaining his latest theory. Scientists from 5 different countries listened carefully to every word. The black hole is creating a new pocket of space-time, he said, pointing to his calculations. Think of it like a bubble forming inside another bubble. Our universe might be one bubble, and this black hole is making a new one. A scientist from NASA raised her hand. But that would mean our own universe might have been born the same way. Exactly, Sunwoo replied. We might be watching how universes are born. At her computer, Minji worked with scientists from Europe and China. They had combined their different ways of looking at the signals and made an important discovery. The patterns are changing again, she announced. They're becoming more structured, more organized, like they're following a plan. Jaiho walked over to look at her screen. The beautiful patterns they had first seen were now forming into clear, repeated shapes. It reminded him of DNA, the code that tells living things how to grow. Could this be some kind of instruction manual? He wondered out loud. A guide for building a universe. Hyunei and Taiwan had been working with the quantum physics team. They had found something strange in their calculations. The energy isn't just creating new space, Taiwan explained. It's creating new rules for how that space works. New physics. Like a mother passing on DNA to a child, Hyunei added. But instead of DNA, it's passing on the rules for how the new universe will work. The scientists in the room fell silent, trying to understand what this meant. They were watching the birth of a new universe, but more than that, they were learning how all universes might be born. Director Yang entered the room with important news. The signal is getting stronger, he said. All our instruments show the same thing. Whatever is happening up there, it's speeding up. The team gathered around the main screen. The data showed that the energy patterns were moving faster, becoming more complex. The black hole was growing, but not like normal black holes that destroy everything around them. This one was building something. Heyun, who had been quiet for a long time, suddenly spoke up. "Look at this energy reading," she said. "It matches the background radiation of our own universe. The pattern is almost exactly the same." "What does that mean?" someone asked. "It means," Jiho said slowly, "that we might be seeing how our own universe was born. This could be how everything starts." The room buzzed with excitement. Scientists who had studied space all their lives were seeing something they never thought possible. They were watching the beginning of the new universe. Minji's computer beeped again. The signal was changing once more. "The patterns," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're not just random anymore. They're telling a story. The story of how universes are born." As the team worked to understand this new development, Jeho looked around the room. Scientists from different countries, speaking different languages, all working together to understand this miracle. Maybe that was part of the message too, that understanding the birth of universes could bring people together in ways nothing else could. The morning sun rose over the Korean Space Research Institute, casting long shadows through the laboratory windows. Jeho Park stood before the assembled international team, his face showing both excitement and concern. The latest data had revealed something unexpected, something that required an immediate decision. "The new universe is having trouble forming," he explained, pointing to the energy readings on the main screen. "The patterns show instability in certain areas. It's like a difficult birth." Hyun-A Kim stepped forward, her expression serious. "We might be able to help," she said. "Our calculations show we could send specific energy patterns that might stabilize the process. But," she paused, looking at her colleagues, "we don't know what effect this might have on the new universe." The room fell silent. The scientists understood the weight of this moment. They had the power to possibly help birth a new universe, but no one knew if they should use it. "Think about what this means," Jaho continued. "If we help, we could become the first beings to assist in the birth of a universe. But if we make a mistake, we might damage it forever." Minji's computer showed the continuing signals from the forming universe. The patterns had become more erratic, like a heartbeat growing unstable. "The instability is getting worse," she reported. "If we're going to do something, we need to decide soon." Director Yang called an emergency meeting of the senior scientists. Representatives from each country sat around the conference table, their faces showing the strain of this decision. "We need to vote," he said. "Each space agency gets one vote. But before we do, we need to understand what's at stake." Sun Woo Baek presented the risks first. "If we send the wrong signals, we could disrupt the natural process. We might create a universe with broken laws of physics. We could be responsible for bringing something damaged into existence." Taiwan countered with the potential benefits. "But if we succeed, we could help create a stable universe. We might even learn how our own universe was formed. This knowledge could be priceless." Heyun added her own concerns. "What if this is a test? What if the ability to help or harm a forming universe is part of how intelligent life evolves? Our choice here could be very important." The debate continued for hours. Scientists who had worked together peacefully now found themselves on opposite sides. Some believed they had a duty to help if they could. Others thought they should only observe, not interfere. Jiho listened to everyone's arguments, but his mind kept returning to the patterns they had seen. The signals hadn't just been random data. They had felt like communication, like a call for help. "I think we should try to help," he finally said. "But we need to be extremely careful. We should start with the smallest possible intervention and watch what happens." Hyun-A disagreed. "It's too risky," she argued. "We don't understand enough about what's happening. We could make things worse." As the debate continued, Minji burst into the room. "The patterns are changing again," she announced. "You need to see this." The team rushed back to the main laboratory. On the screens, the energy patterns from the forming universe had taken on a new shape. They were clearer now, more direct, almost like, "It's asking for help," Minji whispered. "The patterns, they're exactly like a distress signal." Jaiho looked at his colleagues. The choice they had to make would affect not just their careers or their understanding of science, but potentially the birth of a new universe. The weight of this responsibility felt enormous. After much debate, the team made their decision. They would help the forming universe, but in the most careful way possible. Jaiho Park stood at his station, watching as they prepared to send the stabilizing signals. "Everything is ready," Minji announced. She had worked through the night to perfect the signal pattern they would send. "We can begin whenever you give the word." Jaiho looked at Hyuna. Though she had opposed the intervention, she now stood ready to help make it work safely. She nodded at him, showing her support despite her concerns. "Send the first signal," Jaiho ordered. Minji pressed the button. The carefully designed energy pattern shot through space toward the forming black hole. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then the readings on their screens began to change. "The instability is decreasing," Ta-1 reported, his voice filled with excitement. "The patterns are becoming more regular." The international team watched as the new universe responded to their help. The chaotic energy waves slowly became more organized, more structured. It was like watching a struggling infant take its first proper breath. "Look at these readings," Sunwoo called out. "The physics is stabilizing. The new universe is establishing its fundamental laws." Hour by hour, they sent careful signals, each one helping to guide the birth process. They worked in shifts, with scientists from different countries taking turns to monitor the progress. It was truly a global effort now. After 3 days of careful work, something remarkable happened. The energy patterns changed completely. The new universe was no longer just forming. It was growing on its own. "It's beautiful," Hae-yoon whispered, staring at the screens. The patterns had become strong and clear, showing a new universe coming fully into existence. Director Yang entered the room with more surprising news. "We're detecting similar signals from other parts of space," he announced. "At least 3 other locations show the same kind of patterns." The team realized what this meant. Their black hole wasn't unique. Throughout space, new universes were being born. They had just been the first to understand what they were seeing. "We need to set up a permanent monitoring program," Jaiho said. "This isn't just about one event anymore. We're learning how the multiverse works." Yeonji, who had been handling the public communications, shared their success with the world. People everywhere celebrated this new understanding of creation. The discovery brought hope and wonder to millions. 1 month after their first discovery, the team gathered in the main laboratory for a special ceremony. The Korean government had decided to establish a new international center for universe studies, with their team at its heart. "What we discovered here is just the beginning," Jaiho told the assembled scientists and officials. "We now know that universes can be born. We know they can be helped. And most importantly, we know that working together, we can understand the greatest mysteries of existence." Minji's computer still received signals from their first discovery, now a fully formed new universe. The patterns had changed again, becoming what she called baby universe noises, the normal activity of a healthy new cosmos. As the ceremony ended, Jaiho looked at his team. They had started this journey as a small group of Korean scientists, but now they were part of something much bigger. They had helped birth a new universe and discovered that creation itself was an ongoing process throughout space. "Our universe," he said to Hyuna as they watched the latest data come in, "might just be one child in a very large family." The screens continued to show the beautiful patterns of cosmic birth, reminding them that even now, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, new universes were being born, waiting to be discovered.